right? Yeah, Chris Cornell. I saw this video just come up on my thing. I think it's quite new. I'm not, might be wrong though. But Chris Cornell on the anger he felt at Layne Staley's funeral. Now, there's could be a couple of reasons for that. Um, One, because it's a waste of his talent, and it really is. He's one of the saddest cases in that whole Seattle in music. I think he's such a talent that it just went wrong. Um, but it could also be that they were friends and that he couldn't help him, and it's anger at yourself. But then I also think from what Mark Lanigan said about Layne Staley that Layne Staley was almost a bit of the same as the comedian Mitch Hedberg, when Mitch Hedberg pretty much told his family, like, don't try and stop me doing heroin. This is what I love to do and I'm going to do it until I die. Don't bother trying to stop me. And Layne Staley, I don't think ever had that type of conversation with anyone, but I feel like he definitely just, I don't know, just gave up, become a recluse. But I also think that's very common in musicians anyway, that that kind of want to be alone, which is weird that you go out and strive for people to take notice of you, when really as a musician it's kind of the opposite of what. Yeah, anyway, but yeah, let's see what Chris Cornell has to say. Let's go.
Layne Staley, the frontman for Alice in Chains, an amazing vocalist. The harmonies that he and Jerry Chains, an amazing vocalist. The harmonies that he and Jerry Cantrell would come up with on Alice in Chains songs were legendary. But sadly, it would all come to an end for Layne when he died in April of 2002 at the age of just 34. Staley was cremated and a funeral service was held for him on April 28, 2002, and that was held on Bainbridge Island in Washington's Puget Sound. There is a place there called the Kiana Lodge, as you can see in these photos, and that is where Layne's funeral service was held. Chris Cornell, lead singer of Soundgarden, was one of many who attended the service, and he wrote in a blog in 2008 at the anger that he felt that day, and we're going to explain a bit more about that. It all goes back to Andy Wood. He was the lead singer of Mother Love Bone and a very good friend of Chris Cornell's. So this was back in 1990 when Wood died. Everyone had just come back from his funeral / wake that they had for him. So there were various people all in this room. Chris was in this room, and this is where Layne Staley entered. Suddenly I heard slapping footsteps growing louder and louder as they reached the front door, and Layne flew in, completely breaking down and crying so deeply that he looked truly frightened and lost, very childlike. He looked up at everyone at once, and I had this sudden urge to run over and grab him and give him a big hug and tell him everything was going to be okay. I wanted to be that person for Layne, maybe just because he needed it so bad. I wasn't. I didn't get up in front of the room and offer that, and I still regret it. No one else did either. I don't know why. So as I say, that was in 1990 when Andy Wood died, and it was 12 years later at Layne's funeral service when Chris explained just exactly what he was going through that day. Continuing on in the blog, years later at Layne's funeral, I was angry. I kept hearing the twice as bright, half as long speech and the he was just too special for this world nonsense that I had heard at so many other funerals for so many other friends that were so young and talented. I'm not sure why I was that angry. Angry at Layne? Angry at all my other friends for leaving me? Angry at the people running around in circles saying I knew him best or I was the only one he really trusted. Angry at all of them for squandering what I thought of as brilliant futures that would make the world feel to me like a place worth living. And this next part refers to the time that he met him that night at Andy Wood's wake. Or maybe I was just mad at myself because he was dead, and one time I had a chance to pick him up, dust him off, and let him know that there was a person who cared about how much pain he was in, and I didn't do it. So, very interesting words there from Chris Cornell, saying how that night at Andy Wood's wake when Layne came in, sobbing, was not in a good way at all, and just saying there how he wished he could have comforted him that night and told him that stuff was going to be okay. Chris Cornell himself would pass away 15 years after Layne Staley. Cornell died in May of 2017 after performing a show with his band Soundgarden. Cornell was 52 years old. Both of these men a tragic loss, both outstanding in their respective fields as songwriters, frontmen, singers. Rest in peace to both.
All right, it's good to see you all. You people up there too. Right on, thanks a lot.
Yeah, I can get it. But I feel like that's kind of natural to think when someone does that. I like, as much as I understand what Chris is saying, but that's typical men anyway, I think. It's, we're just not trained in that way. It's not in our nature as much as women. Like, women do have a more caring, and obviously not in all senses, like, but in the extremes, like, it's just not. We are not. It's got nothing. It's just how we are as men. As men, it's from as soon as you can remember, you have to be tough because you're a boy, and so you never really learn to be that kind of caring towards someone. It's just not in our instinct. Our instinct is to make fun of things. Um, but I think it's kind of typical to do that now and think that night, oh, I could have. But I don't think any of that really matters. It isn't on anyone else. When someone like, and from here, like I say, from hearing from Mark Lanigan, Layne Staley really gave up. He just, yeah, and I don't think any hug can help that person. To be honest, I don't believe in it. I think that ultimately the person themselves, if they're not going to pull themselves out of it, then you ain't got a chance. If they don't feel the need to change, you can't change them, no matter what. Um, because from what I hear, like Mark Lanigan went round to see him, and quite a few people went to see him to tell him that they cared about him, but he was just so far gone. And it is sad, but when people get in that self-destructive mental state, but I think it's very typical with musicians, and I'm not quite sure why. Nolly, you're going to fall off in a minute, girl. Girl. But yeah, I think that kind of, I think because you're as well, you're very critical on yourself if you play an instrument. Well, at least you should be. But that can bleed into other aspects of your life where you shouldn't be so hard on yourself. Um, but yeah, I get what Chris is saying. Anger at everything. He had lost a lot of people. Like, I don't think there's ever been a kind of scene of musicians so that deteriorated so sadly as the Seattle bands. But yeah, let me know your thoughts. But yeah, that's the reaction. Sweet.